The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Thank you, Tally Olson. We are back, comfortably zoned, with me, the Zigzag Man, in Alameda, California, right across the bay from San Francisco, in the northern part of California. And I'm blessed today. I have a returning guest. It took 4 years to get Scott D. Russell to come back on the airwaves. He's back, and I'm delighted. Scott, nice to have you.
Well, first of all, it's my honor and privilege to be back here, and of course I haven't been away for 4 years. Not that I know of. I don't believe my wife has had me incarcerated to this point, but I'm sure she's considered it on occasion.
You know, there are drugs. She could have drugged you up, and you were Neverland right now.
Well, she's been my long-suffering bride now for over 33 years, and I would imagine that she deserves some sort of award for that, perhaps a Purple Heart.
Well, how about the Medal of Honor?
Most definitely, no question. I think she's certainly qualified for that at this point.
Okay. She is not a little person. She's not a midget, I'm assuming, because
oh no,
she's not a
there's
Bulgarian midget because I pick that up in your writing from time to time. Where did that come from? We share a penchant for the little person, what they go through, their trials, their tribulation, the effects of spinning, all those things that can get. But that's an open-ended question. You'll answer that on some psychiatrist's couch someday.
Well, the political incorrectness is overwhelming. However, I can tell you that
I love it. That's why I say we have that in common. I have to love it. I wish things were back the way they were on a lot of different levels, because I think it's insulting to call a heavy-set person hefty, or husky, rather. Husky.
Well,
what do you mean by husky? You think that sounds better than a lard ass or a fat man or husky? I don't know.
I sincerely, I miss the great George Carlin, who warned us many years ago about the extent of political correctness and how it was entirely altering our language. He envisioned the day that rape victims would be referred to as unwilling sperm recipients. We've actually changed our entire language to accommodate people
you talk about, to be serious, if I were a little person, I would rather be called a midget than a little person. What the fuck does that mean, little person? Am I smaller in stature, perhaps, but am I a smaller person? You're a midget. It means a smaller scale, on a small scale. I didn't think that's what needed changing. I thought kike bastard fucker needed changing.
Oh, no question. Growing up in the South Bronx, in New York City,
in the Air Force, when I was stationed in Texas, and my squad leader would talk to me that way, I campaigned for that. I said, "Sir, that's not nice. Someday they'll change that. There'll be political correctness."
Keep this in mind, that growing up in the South Bronx in New York City, we called each other the most horrible names, and a lot of them were based on our ethnicities. And the truth of the matter is we had each other's backs, and we ate in each other's homes in the evening. And God forbid if someone came into our neighborhood and called us by the names we called each other. But the fact is that today you literally you can go on a late night television show. Hypothetically, let's say Jimmy Kimmel, a comedian.
you can go on Larry David and hear things that.
Oh, yeah, but you can actually, a comedian can make a joke about a Bulgarian gypsy midget on roller skates. And I am telling you that as soon as you leave the studio, crouched in the bushes with a sawed-off pogo stick will be a Bulgarian gypsy midget on roller skates, because it is no longer acceptable to use certain terms and certain language. But that's not what we're here for, is it?
See, I picture them out there now. You're right. They'll have tiny little signs that nobody could read anyway, and squeaky voices, and what the fuck? Who cares? But
exactly.
So much for political correctness. Political correctness comes to podcast radio and The Zone. Scott, before I ask you about your book, I want to talk about, renew the conversation a little bit about when we talked 4 years ago. We both remembered it was about Gil Hodges and the campaign that you, Tony D'Angelo, Bill Hall, I remember you telling me, I had not yet met Bill Hall, and you told me on that interview, you said, the person you need to talk to is Bill Hall. And
Bill Hall is a remarkable gentleman. He's an elected official in his hometown in Oregon. And trust me, I have very, very little respect for politicians in general. So for me to actually like a politician is saying a lot. Bill Hall is a sweetheart. He's a brilliant man. And he has campaigned so beautifully for Gil Hodges' enshrinement in Cooperstown. The truth of the matter is that I no longer campaign for Hodges' enshrinement because I do not even recognize, I do not even acknowledge that there is a Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, because I believe that it is a private, exclusive institution run by the Clark family. I call it the Clark Family Institution. And the people who are enshrined at this institution, it's entirely based on politics. And if they decide that you are not worthy for whatever insane reasons they have, then you will never be enshrined. They play games up there. As you're aware, I compiled a 32-page argument, as it were, for Hodges' enshrinement, listing all of his qualifications statistically, and, of course, his exemplary character. And I was told by a gentleman, and I'm going to name him, his name is Craig Muder, M-U-D-E-R, who told me over the phone and assured me that if I forwarded this study to him, that he would distribute it amongst the Hall of Fame Veterans Committee. So, and I felt confident at that point that it was going to be read. As I found out later on, unfortunately, it was never distributed. And I confronted Mr. Muter in another telephone call, and I said, I understand that this study was never distributed. And he said, well, it was available upon request. And I said, excuse me, why would someone request something they did not know existed? And he said, good question. So we were deceived. We were entirely deceived. I had no intention of distributing it. And, of course, it proved conclusively that Gil Hodges was one of the greatest run producers in the history of baseball. And, of course, these absurd little pissants who come up with reasons. Gil Hodges batted .273 or this or that. They come up with these ridiculous arguments against his qualifications. But I remind them of one thing. They have this quaint little habit in baseball. At the end of 9 innings, they count runs. They don't count WAR. They don't count this BABIP. They don't count these other ridiculous statistics they've invented. They count the runs. And Gil Hodges, at the time, had actually had a higher combination of runs scored and runs driven in per at bat and per plate appearance than 82% of the existing Hall of Famers. Nope, this was not good enough for them, of course. So, and they wouldn't even read it.
What was the Hall's axe to grind with Gil Hodges?
I have no idea. I mean, the man was a legitimate war hero, a decorated war hero, who was so modest that Bill Hall.
You and I about his managerial success, his early demise, of course, but he led the Mets they were formed in 62. By 69, they won the World Championship, and no one believed but two people that would happen. Gil Hodges.
Amazing. And here's another thing, and I think this says it all. Willie Mays was once asked why Gil Hodges, did he believe that Gil Hodges is a Hall of Famer? And Willie Mays, who I believe knows a thing or two about the game of baseball, his response was, I have no idea why Gil Hodges is not in the Hall of Fame. To which I'll add that if Willie Mays believes that Gil Hodges belongs in the Hall of Fame, well, sir, everything else is bullshit.
Right. Very good point. He should just fill out the ballot and they should respect that. No voting, no writers, nothing. Just give me your top 10, Willie. You think he'd include his godson?
Wow. That's probably an unfair question to ask Willie. He probably would. For the record, Ted Williams was the greatest hitter I've ever seen until Barry Bonds came along.
Oh, those
Barry Bonds
were unbelievable. He was in a groove where you just couldn't pitch it. He would not take a ball.
Yeah, amazing. But here's the incredible thing. Bonds, thanks to the advent of PEDs, did become a greater hitter for that time that he was under the influence of PEDs than Ted Williams. I never thought I'd see it, but I did. However, would I put Barry Bonds in the Hall of Fame? No, I would not.
Well, you might if you consider the fact that he was facing pitchers that were under the influence of PEDs.
I do, and yet, oh boy, see, this is a question. We can speak about this all evening.
That's true, and this is a good timing because tomorrow or later today, and this is the 24th of January, the year of someone's Lord, 2018, not mine necessarily, but someone's, and that's cool. And the ballots are being announced tonight. So, would you put I have a few questions for you. Would you think Bonds and Clemens are going to get in eventually?
Oh, of course they will. They will because of the fact that there's an entirely new generation of baseball fans who are totally willing to overlook the fact that these people cheated. Roger Clemens and Barry Bonds were worthy of Hall of Fame enshrinement before they began cheating. In all fairness to Bonds, he saw what Mark McGwire was accomplishing with the PEDs, and he decided to say, well, he absolutely thought that, well, if he's doing that, imagine what I can do because I'm a much greater ball player and hitter than he is. And he was right. And he was. But the fact is, again, that era entirely altered the face of Major League history and just rewrote the entire record book. So what is real and what isn't real? Would these guys have been great players? Yes. But no one in history and no players in history have ever done past the ages of 28 and 32 than those people who performed during that steroid age It's never happened before. So that in itself tells you that those numbers were false. And
so were Nolan Ryan's numbers false as well?
No, because there's no evidence that he was ever a user.
Well, then how? I mean, all of a sudden, an anomaly over 40, throwing 98 miles an hour, and there's something wrong with that.
Well, not necessarily. He just might have been a physical freak in the kind of like in the realm of a Satchel Paige.
It doesn't ring true. I doubt very seriously if there aren't a handful, at least, of PED users that are already sitting in the Hall of Fame.
Oh, no question, including one, I believe, who most likely, well, let's put it this way. The man broke probably the most prestigious record in baseball history, and I'm not speaking of the 56-game hitting streak because that still stands, but another great streak, and I have reason to believe that there's a certain shortstop on the Orioles who, in my opinion, cheated.
Well, he's guilty of being selfish, if nothing else. I don't think he helped his team going for that record.
Well, think of the drug culture around him. His teammates, Brady Anderson, cheater.
Right.
Rafael Palmeiro, cheater. Sammy Sosa, cheater.
So what team didn't have 5 or 6 guys that are already have already been outed in baseball? You could look at the A's. You think, it was McGuire, Canseco. There was rumors. I'll tell you what, if David Stewart didn't use PEDs, I'll be a monkey's uncle.
This is a conversation, as you said, for another time.
Okay, let's get to your book, because I was so impressed. First of all, you took a project to its completion. How many people in the world start, discontinue, postpone, put off, never get to, put it in a closet, whatever project in life? It doesn't have to be a book. It can be a dream that never comes to fruition.
Well,
yours did.
Yep, and I'll try to keep this as brief as possible, but I can tell you that, first of all, I want to thank you for the opportunity, obviously, to promote my book, and just so that the audience understands and is aware, I'm the author of a book called Prophet's End. That would be PROPHET Prophet's End. It's an apolitical novel.
That is spell end for a lot of my audience.
Yep, and of course it's apolitical, something I felt necessary during these days of overwhelming intolerance. And as a person who was born in New York City, I was, of course, devastated by the events of 9/11. And Prophet's End, in many ways, is my response to that horrifying day. I feel that Prophet's End offers hope, and that hope derives from hopelessness. Out of the ashes of despair comes hope. The story's powerful, and yes, and I realize that this is not necessarily up your alley, but the story's powerful, and yes, it is spiritual. So I guess I'll lose the atheist crowd.
Well, I can be spiritual without being religious.
Wonderful.
So it
Wonderful.
Is up
and in truth, I have many atheist friends, many of them accomplished and intelligent, and yet they cannot see what I feel, and again, it's just my opinion, is their absurd belief that nothing created everything. But we won't get into that. And yet they claim to embrace science, which of course is a contradiction, but I'm not here to discuss religion. I'm here to discuss the book. I can tell you, Ralph, that I'm a dreamer. A dreamer, something that was once looked upon as an admirable trait, but sadly now viewed as more of an accusation. I actually envision Prophet's End as being adapted to a motion picture, one in which only a beautiful young lady named Jen Bricker would be capable of portraying the lead romantic character. She's one of the two reasons I wrote this book. Actually, more than two, three, in truth. Who is Jen Bricker? Well, the character Jennifer Swanson in this novel, Prophet's End, is based directly on Jennifer. Jennifer Bricker is the greatest combination of unearthly beauty, perseverance, faith, and courage I've ever seen on this planet. And I actually believe she's an angel. No, really. I contacted Jen a while ago, and what she said nearly brought me to tears. She responded, "It's really amazing how much of me you truly see." I could not respond. I was too choked up. Now, in the event that Prophet's End is indeed adapted to a motion picture, Jen Bricker would stand Hollywood on its not-so-respective heads. No one, I can assure you, has seen the likes of her. Ralph, all writers, as you are no doubt aware, are insecure. I am no exception. Prophet's End, that was my cat speaking, by the way, back there. Prophet's End is dedicated to first responders and to my idol, you've mentioned him before, well, off the air, the incomparable columnist, journalist, and author, Pete Hamill. It is my belief that...
Growing up listening, reading him was a privilege. Him and others, of course, we were loaded with wonderful journalists in New York. We're so blessed.
Not only in New York, but there was Michael Royko in Chicago, and of course Jimmy Breslin in New York, and various others. It's my belief that all compositions, regardless of their length or otherwise, are written with one reader in mind. In this case, I wrote Prophet's End with my idol, Pete Hamill, in mind. And get this now, ironically, I suspect that despite my efforts, that Mr. Hamill has not read my novel, one in which he's actually a main character, a heroic one at that. Then again, as I stated, all writers are insecure. Therefore, it's possible that Pete Hamill has indeed read Prophet's End and believes that it sucks.
It would not surprise me if he read it. It would surprise me if he didn't read it. How could he not?
Well, it's, I'm not a renowned author.
Scott, you pay him such homage and such respect, and you capture what I imagine was him, just from having read him over the
Well, I certainly attempted to, but again, keep in mind that I'm fully cognizant of my own shortcomings. To be clear here, I've attempted to reach Mr. Hamill to no avail. Although recently I reached a wonderful young woman with a lovely Irish brogue, one who assured me that Pete would receive the work. I'm still hopeful. You see, there's apparently some sort of protective cocoon around the icon, no doubt for good reason, since Mr. Hamill recently incurred a nasty injury after a fall. I believe it was approximately 2 years ago that Pete fell, breaking both hips simultaneously. Now, you can imagine how devastating that must be to a gentleman who was so active and vibrant and athletic. Now, I can tell you this. If Pete Hamill even acknowledges this work, I'll die happily when the time arrives. Oh, incidentally, for you Dodger fans out there, spoiler alert. In this novel, the Dodgers play the Yankees in a 7-game World Series, with the conclusion of the World Series being at Yankee Stadium in 1955. And the spoiler alert is that Sandy Almiroz makes a great one-handed catch, turns it into a double play. Gil Hodges knocks in both runs in a 2-0 Johnny Padres victory.
That happens. And so you were a Dodger fan. I'll tell you what happened the morning of that game being played. Tommy Byrne was the Yankee pitcher. I was a Giant fan. I really didn't have an axe to grind. But living across from me was a kid named Neil Silver. We were both 10. And Neil's older brother was a Dodger fan and gave him fodder when he'd argue with me, the Giant fan. So it's before the game, and I said to Neil, who's the world champion? Right this second. We live in the minute. I didn't say it that way. But who is it right now? Well, the Giants, but tonight, today, right? And I got satisfaction out of, at that moment, the Giants were the world champion. Didn't know it would take X number of years for a repeat appearance as world champion. But that's how it was as a kid. I mean, you were either a Giant, a Yankee, or a Dodger fan, and the arguments were crazy making going back and forth. So where were you?
Just imagine me growing up in the South Bronx in a New York Giant household, being a Brooklyn Dodgers fan, and I can state this. Oh, incidentally, I never attended a game at Ebbets Field. My parents, and you'll be happy about this, my parents would take us to the Polo Grounds. I grew up in the Polo Grounds, watching Larry Jansen, watching Sal Magley, watching Dave Kozlow, watching Jim Hearn, Ruben Gomez. In fact, the first Major League game I attended was in 1953. It was a doubleheader. And the Giants had Whitey Lockman at first, Davey Williams at second, Alvin Dark at short, Hank Thompson at third.
Hank Thompson and in center field was not a Willie.
Yes, Willie was in the Army. So Bobby Thompson was the center fielder at that point, moving from third base to center field when Willie went into the Army. The left fielder
ironically, when Willie came up, they moved Bobby Thompson from center to third. So
Yes, and when Willie went into the Army, they reversed that. Monty Irvin, the great Monty Irvin, who I had the privilege and honor of meeting on several occasions, is one of the most elegant gentlemen I've ever met in my life, was the left fielder. Don Mueller. Don Mueller was in right field. Wes Westrom was the catcher. And it was an unforgettable day walking into the Polo Grounds, watching my first game. During the first day I was at the Polo Grounds, I saw a left-handed hitter on the Cubs, a first baseman named Dee Fondy. And Fondy hit a line drive over Bobby Thompson's head in dead center field, and it rolled under the clubhouse steps. By the time Dee Fondy retrieved the ball and got it to the cutoff man, Dee Fondy had already crossed home plate and was receiving congratulations in the top step of the Giant dugout with an inside-the-park home run. So I grew up in the Polo Grounds, although my wife would deny the fact that I grew up, because I've never actually grown up. But so
few of us have on these airwaves. On one level or another, we are still in our formative years, because those are the years that we go back to for comfort. Our memories are most vivid. Who brought you to that game?
And speaking of Pete Hamill, my idol, Pete Hamill, I recall.
Talk about who brought you to that first game you went to.
My parents, and my older brother was there also, but my parents brought me to that first game. But I can tell you that Pete Hamill wrote something once which really got to me. Pete's father was born in Northern Ireland, and Pete once wrote that, you have to remember that he was a gentleman with an Irish brogue who you would think would not be that interested in American baseball, and yet Pete once wrote that his father's one goal in life was to urinate on Walter O'Malley's grave. And you can imagine this being spoken in an Irish brogue. It's a thing of beauty. And that became my goal in life.
Another Irishman, too.
And that became my goal in life, to urinate on Walter O'Malley's grave. And, of course, for the younger listeners, Walter O'Malley was the owner of the Dodgers who moved the Dodgers out of Brooklyn, thereby destroying the lives of so many of us. I was 12 years old when they moved to Los Angeles, and I've never been the same. Never been the same.
I was 10 when the Giants moved. I feel the same way. Two things. Who did you develop a fandom for? Did you follow the Dodgers out in L.A.? And if not, did you root for the Yankees? What did you do in that 5 years before the Mets were formed? And did you root for the Mets when they were formed?
Well, it would be sacrilege to root for the Los Angeles Dodgers. Total sacrilege at that point. That was an impossibility.
Many Dodger fans stuck with them, ironically. Even when the Mets were born, I remember a lot of my neighborhood cronies who were Dodger fans rooted for the Dodgers coming back. And
that would be sacrilege, and I did not root for the Yankees because the Yankees were a lily white, highly prejudiced organization. Now, I did not know at the time, because you have to remember I was 12 years old, and believe it or not, I became, God help me, a Boston Red Sox fan. And I'm living in Massachusetts now, but that's not the reason. The reason I became a Red Sox fan is because I asked my father, and he gave me a foolish answer. I said, does anyone care? Are there any owners that care about baseball and their fans? And my father said, well, Tom Yawkey in Boston. Now, little did I know that Tom Yawkey was this drunken, bigoted racist. I didn't know at the time. So I became a Red Sox fan, and I would listen to games on WTIC in Hartford, Connecticut, on my transistor radio. But I grew out of that, and truthfully, although I had an affinity for the Mets, since 1958, when the Dodgers moved to Los Angeles, I really haven't had a rooting interest in baseball, and because of the fact that as a heartbroken child who had the Brooklyn Dodgers taken away from him, and I can imagine how you felt about the Giants, I just couldn't bring myself. Now, through the years, I rooted for the Marlins when Jack McKeon was the manager. I rooted for the Phillies when Charlie Manuel was the manager. You see a pattern here. I'm old school. And I respect the old school baseball guys. So my affinities have pretty much changed throughout the years. But I'm still a baseball fan without an actual team to root for.
And you root for your memories. That in your mind's eye, Ambrose is making that catch. And
no question. And getting back to that catch, if I may, very briefly, the book Prophet's End, which, as I said, is a tribute to Pete Hamill, to this incredibly beautiful, inspirational young lady named Jen Bricker. The character Jennifer Swanson in the book is based on Jen Bricker. Pete Hamill is actually a character in the book. And Prophet's End is published by Dorrance Publishing in Pittsburgh, and it can be purchased directly through them at their website at www.Dorrance, that's DORRANCE, bookstore.com, or through Amazon or Barnes & Noble online. But even better, you can purchase Prophet's End directly from me, and this is my email address. It's S as in Scott, Russell, which is RUSSELL 37 at Verizon.net. But be sure to list Prophet's End as the subject of your email so I'll know it's not spam. I'll gladly personalize all copies, and I will personally pay postage and handling for all U.S. orders. Even better, they're only $12 each. So for anyone who would like to see a book in which my alter ego, Billy Farrell is on the cover. He's the hero of the book. And
you're so nice to Billy in your novel.
He is my alter ego, and I would hope
you become fast friends. And I think that's the fantasy more than anything else, is that if you have an idol and you're lucky enough to acquaint yourself with them, they don't blow you off.
And by the way, that's Sandy Amoros on the cover of the book also, making that catch.
Right. I'll tell you, it's a quick read, and you people out there, you were nice enough to send me a copy, and it's terrific. You're dreaming of Sandy Amoros too. I see on the front cover. You're dreaming of the Dodgers.
Dreaming of the Dodgers and Sandy Amoros, and of course the character Jen Swanson, who was based on beautiful Jen Bricker, is also, there's a visage of Jen on the cover.
I know, and the cover is very, very well done. They're, without giving anything away about Jen, she's disabled, and there's a picture of her wheelchair on the cover, and I want to give credit to who it was that designed said cover. Who was that?
A young lady named Marielle Hester. Who works for Dorrance Publishing, actually drew that cover, and I agree with you. She did a magnificent job with the cover. I think it's and her visage of Jen is just so right on. It's just unbelievable. And again, there are no spoiler alerts other than the fact that Sandy Amoros makes a great catch. But I honestly believe that people will enjoy this book. It's inexpensive. It makes for a great gift also. And I really appreciate you having me on. I would like to discuss Gil Hodges in the future with you.
I'd like to discuss a lot of things with you. Keep coming back, please.
I will. That's a promise.
That makes me happy. And I want you to listen to how I'm ending most of the podcasts on the network. I'm imploring folks to gather up some lightly used children's books and box them up, bring them to the Head Start program in a community that you live. There are a myriad of reasons for this. Kids need to read, develop a passion. They need to get their noses out of the games and their devices, and they need to be school ready. Because I'm no sociologist, but this generation is messed up, and our only hope to keep this all going is through the youth of America, as Casey Stengel would have said. So
I agree with you entirely, but I want to make one little point before I go, and that's that in regard to, you mentioned the inspiration for the book also, this young lady, Jen Bricker. You mentioned disabled. She is one of the least disabled people on this planet. She may reside in a wheelchair on occasion, but what she does is absolutely remarkable, and she is one of the least disabled people on this planet. She's extremely...
Well, that's another word that comes from political correctness. You would have said 10 years ago, in reference to someone who's in a wheelchair, you might have said handicapped. And the word that they chose to replace handicapped denotes a weakness as well. You can't win for losing in this language and the way the language has evolved.
Yep, wonderful. And again, Ralph, thank you so much for having me on the show. And as we used to say in the South Bronx growing up, yo, Vinny, throw me the ball, man.
Hey, yo. Listen, Scott, I just have to ask you, Scott D. Russell, what does the D stand for?
The D stands for David.
David. Beautiful.
Yes, sir.
Thank you again. Come back soon. If you're listening out there, you come back soon, too. I enjoy talking to you, and most of all, I enjoy talking to Scott. Be well, sir.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Adios, everybody.
Thank you, Ralph.